Spain has been in the news this week with a specific focus on Catalonia, after the Catalonians tried to hold an election which the Spanish government called illegal, and so they sent in Spanish forces and police to try and stop the Catalonians from voting in this referendum that they held. But why is there this distinction between Spanish people and Catalonian people? After all, Catalonia is a part of Spain, at least for now. Well, I'm History with Hilbert, and I've decided to have a look at the history of Catalonia to better understand where this distinction and division comes from. So before we begin, let's quickly make sure that we know what we're dealing with. Catalonia is currently a part of Spain, and as you can see, it's in the northeastern extreme of the Iberian Peninsula, the part of Spain that borders with France on the border area there. Now, if we go back to when Spain was one of the provinces under control of the Romans, we see that the Romans introduced Vulgar Latin into the population. They started speaking this language, and linguistics is very important for understanding the current situation in Catalonia. As with Vulgar Latin, this evolved into lots of different regional languages, one of which would become Spanish. But you also have various other ones, not all from Vulgar Latin, I might add. Basque and Arabic clearly are not from Latinate languages. One of the languages that was based on Vulgar Latin was Catalan, which is spoken and which is obviously where Catalonia, the name, comes from. During the High Middle Ages, the map of Spain looked something like this, with the Christian kingdoms having pushed the Muslim invasion of the Iberian Peninsula right down to only having the Emirate of Granada in the very south of what used to be Al-Andalus. Now we can see that the largest kingdom there was Castilla y Leon. However, there were two other kingdoms in what is now Spain, Navarre and Aragon. And Aragon is the kingdom in which Catalonia was part. Now, the Catalonians were actually quite happy being part of the Aragonese kingdom because the Aragonese respected Catalan culture and allowed laws and official business as well as everyday life to continue in Catalonia using their same customs and, importantly, the same language. Now, the Aragonese also had their own language, which was called Aragonese, but this is less spoken nowadays. However, when Ferdinand of Aragon married Isabella of Castile, this came to an end, and we can see that this was the real thing that kicks off the start of the Spain that we know today, and then later on the final end of the Reconquista. Catalonia didn't do too badly as part of this new Spanish kingdom until the outbreak of the War of Spanish Succession, which pitted the English, the Scottish, the Hanoverians, the Portuguese, the Prussians and Savoy against the Spanish, the Bavarians and the French. Oh wait, I've missed one, haven't I? Now, I said that Spain was fighting against the coalition of other European powers, but this isn't entirely true, as half of Spain, the Crown of Aragon, fought against the rest of Spain. The Crown of Aragon wanted to put the Austrian claimant on the throne, whereas the other Spaniards wanted to put Philip V of Spain on the throne of, I believe, the Habsburg Empire, or Spain itself, which was why it's the War of Spanish Succession. Now, this led to the siege of Barcelona as the rest of Spain invaded Catalonia, and Barcelona subsequently fell on the 11th of September, which to this day is the Diada Nacional in Catalan, hopefully I'm getting the pronunciation there, which is the national day for Catalonians, as this marks the end of any sort of independence that the Catalonians had up until much later. Now, this was followed by periods when Catalan was banned as a language in official areas of influence, and basically the Catalonians felt that the rest of the Spaniards, after they had been defeated, were oppressing them, and things like the language weren't allowed to be spoken much, and it was removed from official documentation, so the language decreased in the amount of speakers and the sphere of influence, obviously. Now, this went on up until the 18th and then 19th and 20th centuries, when Catalonian nationalism started to rise up again, as it did with many different nationalistic movements throughout Europe. And in the early 20th century, after the first dictatorship of Primo de Rivera, and then the abdication of, or the removal of, the monarchy in Spain, Catalonia actually went independent for a very short amount of time before it became an autonomous region in the Second Spanish Republic under this man, which essentially meant it was still part of Spain, but it had a lot more freedom
freedom to do things that it wanted to do, rather than being under direct control in all matters from a central government in Madrid. Now, this went on, and when the Second Republic was declared, the Catalonians were actually very happy with this, because they were given a lot more freedom. The language, Catalan, was allowed to expand more, and a lot more speakers started to speak Catalan without fear of oppression, as the Second Republican government was quite tolerant towards minority languages and minority rights, and it had a similar status to that in the Basque Country, which also had its own language and its own culture and customs. Now, because of this, the Catalonia was very republican during the Spanish Civil War, and it was one of the last areas to be taken in 1938 by nationalist forces, being right on the eastern side of Spain. Remember, the nationalists took mostly western and parts of northern Spain first in an attempted coup, and then pushed their way across Spain until the end. And it was only in 1938, after a long siege and a bombardment of Barcelona, that they managed to capture Catalonia. And as such, during Franco's reign, the Catalonians were very much repressed by the Frankist dictatorship, as the Catalonians had gone anarchist and then communist. They were very left-wing. That was a very big trend among Catalonians. And the language, Catalan, it wasn't allowed to be spoken in public at all. You weren't allowed to read books in Catalan in public, which is a similar situation to a lot of minority languages throughout Europe at the time, but especially so because this was a fascist dictatorship. Fascists tended not to like the right wing, tend not to like rights for minority languages too much, especially in this kind of era, which was definitely the case, whereas the left-wing governments in Spain had been more of an advocate for these obviously minority languages. Now, when Franco died in 1975, Spain went back to a democracy, and at this point Catalonia gained a similar status to the one it had under the Second Republic. So the language was no longer oppressed. It was allowed to be the official language of Catalonia alongside Spain, although there is still some discussion about this, as a lot of Spaniards feel like it's not right that Catalonian should be a second official language in Catalonia, because they should be Spaniards first and then Catalonian second, which obviously is a hot point of contestation now. But essentially they got their rights back now that Franco is gone. Alright, so this has been my quick little history of Catalonia and why they are separate. Basically, to sum it up, they had a different history to a lot of Spain, but then again, lots of Spaniards did. They had their own language, which was looked down upon at various points in history, and they do feel like they are a separate people because of these different histories and things that have happened. Although, again, lots of people in Spain could say the same thing. Now, if you're interested in the current events and you'd like me to do a video maybe on the current events and why the Spaniards or some Spaniards are so against Catalonian independence and other things like that, then just leave a comment in the link below and I'd be happy to do that, because I've got a few views that maybe I'd like to share if you guys would be interested. But if not, then I don't mind, because I've got plenty more videos coming, including an update video sometime this week and the results to the channel survey. Thank you everyone for doing that. That's been a huge help to me. So everyone, thanks very much for watching. I'm History with Hilbert. If you're new, don't forget to hit the subscribe button or the like button, and if you have any questions or any requests, then just comment in the comment section below. Thanks very much.